Well, good morning. In this chapter, we're going to learn adjectives. And adjectives are simply words that modify a noun or a pronoun, right? Good, bad, high, low. Adjectives in English perform three basic functions. An adjective can function as an attributive, which means it simply modifies another word. It gives an attribute to the word. He is a good student. Good is an attributive adjective that is giving an attribute or telling you something about the noun it modifies, namely student. But adjectives can also function substantively. They can function as substantives. They can function as nouns, in other words. And so, for example, you can say, the good are welcome. Now, good technically is an adjective, but it's functioning as a noun, isn't it? But adjectives can also function as predicates. And this is when you have the subject and you have the verb normally of to be, am, are, was, were. And because of the meaning of that word, because it's an equative verb, what follows it doesn't modify the subject, but it predicates something about it. It makes an assertion about it. So if you say, she is good, good doesn't modify she, but it's telling you something about the subject. It's asserting something about it. And it just has to do with equative verbs and what the verb to be means. The encouraging thing about adjectives in Greek is that you already know all the forms. Now you'll notice that this word, it's agathos, it means good. You notice that it occurs, unlike nouns, in all three genders. We'll talk about why in just a second. But the endings of all the adjectives that you're going to meet in chapter 9 are all endings that you know already. The adjective in Greek functions basically the same way that it does in English. And so, for example, you can have Greek adjectives functioning as an attributive. In other words, it's going to tell you something about the noun that it modifies. Now, how would you guess, and it's a guess, but you already have a hint in some other part of speech you know, how would you guess a Greek speaker would establish the form of an adjective that's modifying a noun? How would he determine the case, number, and gender? Yeah, whatever the noun is. So that an adjective that is an attributive adjective that is modifying another noun is going to be in the same case, number, and gender of the word it modifies. But Greek adjectives can also function substantively. So, for example, if you had ha agathos estin, it's going to be translated, the good is something or other. Now let's make a stab at this. How do you think that the Greek writer would determine the case of an adjective that's functioning as if it were a noun? Right, its function. In this case, what is agathos doing in the sentence? It's the subject, and therefore it's in the nominative. Okay, so the rule is that if an adjective is functioning substantively, its case is determined by its function in the sentence. See, there's nothing for it to modify. Otherwise, it'd be an attributive. How do you think they're going to determine the gender and number of a substantival adjective? Yeah, context. In other words, what does it stand for? Does it stand for a single masculine, or a plural feminine, or maybe a singular neuter? And at this point, we're in natural gender. Yes, well, whatever it stands for. I mean, technically, there's not an antecedent. That's grammar has to do with pronouns. But the adjective is going to stand for something. And it's going to take its gender and number from whatever it stands for. The third function for the Greek adjective is the predicate function. In other words, if you were to see ha anthropos agathos, you'll find out in a second why, but you would translate that, the man is good. But because a predicate adjective is always asserting something about the subject, guess what case it always is? Nominative. What gender and number is a predicate adjective going to be? Whatever it stands for. What I wanted to stress by the way I'm doing this is that there's not a whole lot new to learn here. That you're taking things you've learned from the definite article and inflection in general and saying, well, yeah, that's common sense. Obviously, that's the way it works. The question then becomes, how do you recognize these things? When you see an adjective in the text, how do you know whether it's an attributive, a substantive, or a predicate? It all depends upon whether there's an article present or not. That's the key to everything in adjectives. Is there an article with the adjective? Is there an article with the noun? Is there an article with both? If you have ha agathos anthropos, or if you have ha anthropos ha agathos, you'll notice that in both situations, the adjective, agathos, is attributive. You can either have article, adjective, noun, or you can have article, noun, article, adjective. It doesn't make any difference which way it comes. In both of those cases, you have an articular adjective, and therefore you know that it's an attributive adjective. Okay, what if you have ha agathos? In other words, what if you have an adjective and there's nothing for it to modify? What do you have? You have a substantival adjective. You'll say the good and you'll go start looking for the good what. You'll find out there is no what. And oh, a substantival. Now, one of the tricks on substantival adjectives is that you can add in words if the context requires it. If you had ha agathos, see how good your guessing machine is. What could you add in? Because sometimes in English you can say the good, but if it's referring to a person, you can't. So what could you say? You'd say the good. You could say the good one if the masculine was functioning generically. If it was referring to a single male, then you could say the good. You could say the good man. What would it be if the word was referring to a good woman? He agathe. In other words, what you do is you look at the gender and the number of a substantival adjective, recognizing that when adjectives function substantively, they follow natural gender. And you can just add in a word that fits. If it's plural, you could say the good ones, or the good people, or the good crowd, or whatever fits the context. If you saw ha anthropos agathos, or agathos ha anthropos, what's different about that from the first two examples? Yeah, there's no article with the adjective. The article's there with the noun, but there's no article with the adjective. That's called the predicate position. And what you can do is supply the verb I am in one of its forms. So that would be translated, the man is good. So if there's an article present, whether it's with the noun or the adjective or both, translation is quite simple. The problem becomes, what if there aren't any articles? In other words, there's no clue. You don't have the help of the article. There's only one way to translate these, and the answer is context. In other words, you simply have to look at the context of the sentence and ask yourself what makes sense. And if you have agathos anthropos or anthropos agathos, the order, again, for first year doesn't matter. There are two ways that you could translate that. But you look at the context and you say, is good qualifying man, is it modifying man, or is good asserting something about man? And so you could translate agathos anthropos as a good man or a man is good.